When you're building a game, even the smallest little things can end up resulting in dozens and dozens of decisions, and each decision becomes increasingly a lesser of two evils kind of situation. And in this case, I want to talk about the absolute peril that is modular level design and figuring out how to build the individual pieces that a level gets made out of. So usually in games, levels are built out of small pieces to make it easy to move pieces around within the game engine without having to have a 3D artist rebuild an entire room. For example, this room is built out of a bunch of little pieces. So if I wanted to, let's say, move this wall, I can just slide it forward and maybe reposition these enemy spawners so that they don't spawn inside the wall. And that's all I have to do. And if this entire room was built out of a single piece, I would maybe have to go back to the art department, in this case, just a guy, and have him rebuild the whole room and move things around. And he would have to like change texture mapping and be this whole thing. So it's really optimal to the flow of designing and iterating upon a game to build things out of these little pieces. However, it's really hard to design these pieces in such a way that they will work in all scenarios. Take this example of a room made out of very simple walls. These are just cubes with their origin in the center. I can rotate them around and move them. And let's say I've made these two rooms and I want these two rooms to be adjoined to one another. Then I could then just slide them together and put them next to each other. And now you can see I have all these sort of messy looking interpenetrating faces. That's really bad, right? An alternative to this would be to make the walls have only one side. So this wall example, it's completely invisible from one side. So if I were to build a room out of it, I could directly abut two rooms and they would not interfere with one another. I can build this little room, duplicate it, put another one here. It's kind of hard to see, but yeah, there's no Z fighting or anything. However, while this is a very good solution and lots of games use it, in my example, my game, you have a sort of 3/4 overhead perspective, so I need walls with thickness more along the lines of this. However, if these are all snapped onto a grid so that I can easily put them together, they're just gonna sort of fight with each other. Another option I could use is maybe not snapping things onto a grid so that I could just slightly move these just like a little itty bitty bit. But again, my game, it's literally grid-based. Like all of the gameplay mechanics are reliant on everything happening on a grid. So the solution is to build your walls in such a way that when you rotate them, they are flush with the edge of a grid cell while instead of being centered on it. To show you what I mean, I can compare this simple wall to one of the actual walls in my game. So if I were to rotate this wall, you can see it sort of rotates about its center. So if I were to rotate it 180 degrees, it's essentially identical. It's like flipped around, but you can see its position is exactly the same. However, when I rotate this wall, it rotates about the very corner of itself, which is very different. And you can see if I were to flip it around 180 degrees and butt it up against this other one, they're designed in such a way that they just perfectly sort of kiss each other. They just barely touch. And this is really nice for creating modular levels because it means I can build rooms without having to worry too much about the rooms that are going to be next to those rooms, as long as I build them with all the pieces actually on the grid. The only problem with this, though, is that now it's technically possible to build a room inside out. And I've created this example here where this room is built correctly, and if I were to duplicate it and move it over, you can see it does what I was describing before, where it like perfectly connects. But this other room is made inside out. And not only are there these seams in the corners, but we can't connect them. Like they're either slightly separated or doing the intersection backwards, where like the wall from this room is actually in this room, and it's just not quite correct. And this is something that's really hard to keep track of while you're building a room, like especially because I have artists that are potentially going to be working on these rooms. Like it's not just going to be me, and we don't want to build 50 rooms and then find out that 20 of them have inside out walls. So I actually built a tool that shows me which side of the wall is the outside. So if I enable gizmos and select something, I can see now it's very obvious if I select the inside out wall that all the red is on the inside. That's not right. If I select one of the walls that's correct, all the red's on the outside. And if I grab an actual room here, I can see that this makes it very clear. You can see I also have some gizmos on the floors and the doorways to show which way is which and all that stuff. But it'd be very hard to accidentally put a wall inside out. If this wall was facing inward, it would be abundantly clear that I had done something wrong. You can see it's like flickering. It's very obvious. And this has saved me a ton of time and really, goes back to what I've been saying in a lot of these videos of just like trying to make the process of making the game enjoyable and seamless, and spending this little bit of extra effort to make this something that I can just not have to stress about as much. I tend to have very Midwestern syndrome with this stuff and always say like, oh, this is good enough, I don't have to worry about it. But I think every time that I've slowed down a little bit and taken the effort to make a tool for something or add some extra rendering to something to make it clear which way it's supposed to go, all this little stuff really adds up to just making the game more enjoyable to make. And since this is a hobby project, it's only getting made if I'm having fun making it. So that's pretty much all I had to say about this one. Let me know what you thought in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one.